first presentation, it's a group presentation, and this is by Danielle Bainton, who is an infection control professional at the Ottawa Hospital with the Champlain IPAC Hub program. There's also Jennifer Doyle, who is an ICP as well with the IPAC Hub, who was once a registered therapist, and Adebiyi, who's also an ICP with the IPAC Hub and who has a master's in public health. They both support the IPAC programs across long-term care homes, retirement homes, and they're all CIC certified. They bring expertise in strengthening IPAC practices through education, program development, and quality improvement initiatives in high-risk and resource variable environments. At the 2026 IPAC Canada National Conference in Toronto, their abstract titled Adenosine Triphosphate Testing as an Adjunct Tool for Environmental Cleaning Education in Long-Term Care Retirement Homes was awarded the Dr. John M. Mill Best First Time Abstract Award. It recognizes its innovative approach to enhancing environmental cleaning education. The group was also the recipient of the 2026 Diversity Scholarship, supporting their continued contributions to advancing IPAC controlled practice. Without further ado, I'll first give you over to Danielle, who will present on ATP testing as an adjunct tool.
All right, I'll just make sure I can face everyone. All right, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Great. So I won't redo an intro because Zana did a good job. But today, like she said, we will be sharing with you the abstract that we submitted for a poster this year. So a little bit on the background of our abstract. So first we'll start by reviewing why environmental cleaning is so important. So as we all know, surface contamination is actually very common in healthcare, and congregate living settings are no exceptions. Unfortunately, a lot of the time it goes unnoticed. When reviewing literature, we can find that multi-drug resistant organisms can be found in up to 93% of resident rooms and shared spaces. And importantly, contaminated surfaces are estimated to contribute to about 20 to 40% of transmission. So what makes this especially challenging is how transmission happens. It's often indirect transmission through healthcare workers' hands after touching contaminated surfaces or residents. And one key issue is that hand hygiene compliance tends to be lower after contact of surfaces in the environment as opposed to direct resident care. So we all know a lot of staff are good at doing hand hygiene after they've touched a resident, but they don't always think of it when touching surfaces. So overall, surfaces play a much bigger role than we sometimes realize, and they're critical components of infection control. So despite routine cleaning protocols, contamination can still persist. Even after terminal cleaning, it really highlights that there are opportunities for improvement, not just in what we clean, but how we clean. During our routine visits to homes across the Champlain region, we started to notice recurring gaps in environmental services practices. This included inconsistencies in cleaning technique, product use, and overall approach to disinfection. So while policies were often in place, the implementation wasn't always optimal, which is what led to us to explore this further. Based on these observations, we started to explore how we could better support environmental services staff. We focused on three main goals. One, increasing awareness of how common and important surface contamination is. We did strengthening education around cleaning and disinfection practices, and working collaboratively with EVS teams to problem solve challenges. This is where ATP comes in. So ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is found in all living cells and organic material. So when we detect ATP on a surface, it's essentially telling us that there's some level of residual contamination, whether that's microorganisms or it could even be things like dust, anything organic. ATP testing gives us a measurable objective way to assess cleanliness using what are called relative light units, or RLUs. In general, a threshold of 100 RLUs is commonly used, but that may depend on the manufacturer's directions. The company we use also have different swabs depending on your budget. Some of them are more specific than others, so that might change what threshold you would use. Anything above the predetermined threshold suggests that a surface may not be adequately cleaned. What's helpful about this tool is that it provides immediate feedback, which makes it very practical in an educational setting. When ATP testing is incorporated with education, it becomes much more than just a measurement tool. It becomes a teaching tool as well. It allows us to identify specific gaps in cleaning practices in real time and address them on the spot. It also creates opportunities for hands-on learning and coaching, which is often much more impactful than traditional classroom education alone. I'll hand it off to my colleague Ronke.
Hi everyone, so we're just going to be moving on to the next. Actually, can you all hear me okay? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to be moving on to the next section. So we're going to be talking about the objectives. So after all of the background information that Danielle has just discussed, with all of that information, it helped us determine what we wanted our objectives to be when we implemented the project. So the first objective is to improve EBS education and training through a multimodal learning approach. So why did we want to use multimodal learning? The first reason is that it reduces monotony, and it also incorporates multiple elements, including lectures, discussion, hands-on engagement, hands-on kind of doing the work to help improve engagement. And multimodal learning, it also targets variation in staff learning preferences. So some people learn better by doing, some people learn better by discussing, some people learn better by listening. So by using all of these variations, we're able to target different staff preferences. Also, the way we implemented the approach, it helps to improve recall in that we introduce best practices over a span of a few weeks. So we went into the homes initially, and then we went back after a few weeks to try to reinforce what we discussed the first time we went in. So that's the first objective. So moving on to the second objective, we wanted to incorporate ATP testing. So we know what the evidence is about ATP testing. We know that it works, we know that it helps to improve engagement. So we wanted to implement that or incorporate that into the training programs that we created as an adjunct tool for education, with the overall goal of strengthening. So what our overall goal was to strengthen staff's understanding of cleaning and disinfection practices. So we wanted to improve their knowledge, their understanding, and their ability to implement best practices into their cleaning and disinfection. So we're going to move on to the project. So our homes were selected when we go in to do visits. We do the site visits, we do the yearly IPAC audits with the homes, as well as we support with outbreaks. So when we go into the homes to offer these visits and supports, when we observe gaps, we basically just offer our services. So we let them know that we have created a certain education for EBS staff that's very robust. We offer our services, and if they accept them, they're practically included into the project. So we also took some time to prepare to implement this project. The first thing that we did was to review best practice guidelines. So we wanted to make sure that we were up to date on our information and what we know. And then we also reviewed adult learning principles. And this was very important because we're going into homes, we're going to educate older staff. Some of them have been working in the role for about 10, 15 years. So we're going into the homes with what we know is best practice, and we're basically going to be challenging what they've been doing for over 10 to 15 years. So we wanted to make sure we understood and we have the knowledge on how to educate people with experience. So that was very important. So what we did next was then create that interactive education. So a PowerPoint education, and it took us a bit of time. So everyone on the team reviewed it. We provided feedback to each other before we decided on our final product. We purchased the ATP machine, the testing supplies, and then all the staff on the team was trained. So we then decided on testing high touch surfaces, and we did that because we know that the transmission risk for high touch surfaces are higher. And then we determined the pass and fail thresholds using manufacturer's instructions. All right, so how did we implement the project? So we talked about, or I have mentioned, the multimodal, multi-step approach. So the first thing we did was we went into the homes, we provided group education. The group education involved, first of all, reviewing best practices. So that's like the lecture component of the group education. And then after that, we had a discussion about their current cleaning workflows. So basically, these are best practices, and this is what are you doing currently? Are they in alignment? Are they not in alignment? So if they're not in alignment, then we have that discussion about, okay, what are the barriers? Why are they not, or why are you not following best practices? And let's discuss, let's work together to figure out how we can collaborate to problem solve, to help you basically be able to follow what the best practices are. So that's the first step. Then the second step was the individualized audit. So we didn't do that right away. We gave them some time, like 2 to 3 weeks after, just to digest the information that was provided and give them time to be able to incorporate everything that they've learned into their cleaning practices. And then we went back into the homes with the expectation that after we had, we've had all of that education, we've had all of that discussion, we wanted to see that all of that information was actually implemented in their practice. But unfortunately, we know that change can be very difficult and it does take time. People revert back to previous behavior. So we did find that that second step was actually very necessary. So what we did on the second step was we observed their routine cleaning practices. So we watched them while they were cleaning. Then we did the ATP swabs of surfaces they had cleaned with the with the ATP machine and the swabs. And then we were able to provide real-time feedback. So feedback right away, coaching right away with the scores that they had, and then had that discussion. So we did all of that, and then we, after that, basically developed recommendations for the home. We had a discussion with their leadership, and we provided recommendations that was targeted to each home because we were able to do that education part, the audits, and then provide recommendations for improved practice for the future. So for those who are not aware of ATP testing or what that is, this is basically how it works. The whole thing takes less than a minute. So the first thing you do is you swab the surface, and then it goes into a test tube, has a cap with a reagent in it that's broken, goes into the container, you mix it together, put that into the machine, and then in a few seconds, basically you get the result and you're able to provide some feedback. So what were our results? So when we completed the formal in-class education with the EBS teams, we returned for a follow-up visit like we discussed, and there were some gaps that we identified when we did our observation. The first thing was inadequate contact time with disinfectant. So basically, an example of this is when we did the education, we would ask staff, for example, what's the contact time of your disinfectant that you use in your home? And they didn't know that initially during the first education. So then when we go back, right, so we have education, we discuss it, we tell them, okay, well, this is the product you use, it's 5 minutes. Then we go back to do the audits, and what we expect to see is that they're actually following the contact time because now they know what it is. But that's not something that still translates. So again, that needs to be reinforced that yes, it's 5 minutes, but what does 5 minutes look like in terms of how wet should your cloth be? So inadequate contact time, ineffective microfiber use, improper disinfectant dilution, insufficient wiping pressure, so people are just like, they're not using that friction as required, and missed high touch surfaces. So those are some of the gaps that we identified. Okay, so just in terms of more results here, figure 3 shows the ATP test results by care setting. So we basically went into 21 long-term care and retirement homes, so 11 long-term care in total and 10 retirement homes. The green is the results that passed, and the red are those that failed. So in total, about 63% of surfaces exceeded the 100 ROU threshold that we had. And then figure 4 shows the swabs by surface category. So We did a total of 171 ATP tests in total, and the surfaces that we swabbed, so we mostly swabbed toilets and sinks, but then we did other high-touch surfaces such as bed rails, handrails, housekeeping parts, elevator buttons, just to again drive home that information and all of the education that we were giving the staff. It would also be very important to talk about the staff impact itself. So we got really, really high engagement, and that's why that multimodal learning approach is very important. The staff were very engaged. They were very at first they were nervous about the results, the scores, but then, just reinforcing that this is about education. So they were quite engaged, positive response to hands-on real-time feedback, and just increased awareness, which is what we were trying to get them to understand, that you play a role. Contamination is not always visible. You think you might be cleaning well, but you're not doing as well as you think, So again, that increased awareness of the impact of cleaning and disinfection and staff's role in prevention. So our lessons learned in total, or in general, is that education on its own. So you don't want to just teach people, so you're not just sitting in a classroom lecture style and just kind of telling people what to do. It doesn't really produce consistent adherence to cleaning practices. You want a combined approach. So you want that in-person education, direct observation, providing feedback. So making sure that people are listening, they're discussing, they're doing, combining that approach. It enhances cleaning technique and supports stronger infection prevention and control in general. And then the ATP testing. The ATP testing worked really well. It helped us to deliver practical, actionable feedback, and it also raises staff engagement. But the only thing is that it's quite expensive. So the cost of the devices and the test swabs, it's expensive, so that may restrict widespread implementation.
So we thought we would add a little section on what it was like to write our first abstract. It wasn't all straightforward, so we'll go through it together. So one of our biggest challenges was timing. We decided to do this a week, maybe two before. So we weren't really prepared to do it, and it was just our manager that kind of encouraged us to give it a try. So we got together as a team to figure out what we would even write about, because we didn't have a subject. We were just encouraged to do an abstract. Most of us also hadn't, or all of us hadn't ever written an abstract before, let alone one for a conference. And we kind of incorrectly assumed that we needed some kind of formal research or formal data to write the abstract. So we kept going back and forwards and how we could gather data in a week, how what we could do, and it was very overwhelming.
Okay, so like Danielle said, it was very overwhelming, but then we actually took our time to read the guidelines that IPAC had provided, because we didn't do that honestly really well. We just thought it was supposed to be some kind of a formal research project. So we read the guidelines very well, and then we did a bit more digging, and that's when we had our moment of clarity. We're like, oh, it really doesn't have to be a research project. It could just be something, or a formal research study. It could just be something that we had implemented in our practice. So that changed everything. Everything clicked for us at that point. And then basically at that point we had a lot of ideas. So then we started thinking, okay, what do we want to do? And that's what led us to, this project, because we had been, we had taken a lot of time to work on the projects that implement EVS. We, improved EVS cleaning practices because we had seen a lot of gaps. So it was basically the perfect project, and yeah, that shift in perspective made the whole process much more attainable for us.
So we had our topic. We decided to go with the ATP testing, which was implemented by our Oliver. So he's the one that had the idea of trying to ask for funding from the ministry. And we thought that is a good topic because it is something that is very relevant, and because a lot of our settings are focusing on EVS. And it's also something that's a bit novel. None of the other IPAC hubs in Ontario have ATP testing, so we thought a lot of them would be interested in seeing how that worked. So once we had our topic, we started by looking at examples of past abstracts from our colleagues at the Ottawa Hospital, as well as your posters that are on the SharePoint, so we could get an idea of the structure and expectations of an abstract. Then we moved into drafting, reviewing, and probably the hardest part was cutting it down to meet the word count. Well, that was another issue where we thought we were looking at a word count, but and we were very proud of our abstract, and we were well under the word count, only to find out it's a character count, and we were well above the character count. So cutting our abstract was very difficult. Obviously, once you write something, you're very attached to it, and trying to remove things can be a little bit hard without, leaving your personal touch. Overall, the experience did highlight the importance of teamwork, planning, and being very familiar with submission requirements. Maybe reading it more than once to get those little details. Here's a picture of us at the IPAC conference with our poster. Unfortunately, one of our co-authors, Kim Armour, was not able to meet with us at the conference, but she was definitely part of the work that got us here. And I really encourage everyone to consider writing and submitting an abstract. It's such a valuable experience. We all learned a lot in the process, and the reality is everyone has something worth sharing. We just don't always know about it. Whether it's a research project or quality improvement initiative, or even a situation that led to change or innovation in your practice. It also doesn't have to be a project with perfect or positive results. Some of the most meaningful learning, in my opinion, comes from challenges or things that didn't go as planned, and those are absolutely worth sharing. I think our team is a good example of that. When we submitted our abstract, we didn't think it was particularly strong, in part because of all of the hurdles we had to gone over in the week or two. But we were just proud that we had gone through the process and we actually went all the way to the submission phase. And we told ourselves that next time we would be able to do better and maybe actually have it accepted by the conference. So we're generally surprised when I found in my junk folder an email from Jerry saying that we had won the best first-time abstract. So that was a very shocking thing to find in your junk emails. And that's it. We have our references here. We also did bring some posters and mini forms. So if anyone wants to look at it, please do take some. And that's it for us. Thank you. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, did you notice a difference in their practice if, let's say, it was someone who was symptomatic, like with diarrhea, like in their cleaning, when you're auditing, with their cleaning process, versus like someone who didn't have diarrhea? Like, did you notice a difference when you were auditing? Did that make a difference? And then my other question was there a common theme as a barrier amongst all of the LTCs in our retirement homes to doing the best practice? Like, was there one thing that was more in particular than others?
Yeah, I would say for your second question, there's a lot of themes. One of them are contact times. You ask them what's a contact time and they're like, I don't know.
Okay.
And then they try to guess and they're usually not far. The other thing is a lot of long-term care homes use disinfectants that are 5 minutes.
Okay.
And 5 minutes is actually quite hard to reach. Almost impossible, but just because of funding, that's what they have. And it's actually better because 2 years ago they had 10-minute contact time stuff. So just having the staff realize how long is 5 minutes. I usually tell them think about your lunch in the microwave. 5 minutes is really long to wait. Try and time yourself and go back and check to see if it's still wet. Had one home that had a 10-minute disinfectant contact time, and they didn't really believe us, but they actually did a test where they had the cloth soaked and then they brought it and it was dripping and they washed it and it only lasted 6 minutes. So then at that point, that proved to management that they really did need to change. But even with the 5 minutes, either they don't know it or they don't reach it. Other common things I would say, the cleaning techniques are kind of all over the place depending on the staff. You'll also see a staff, and then you learn like, oh, that staff was trained by that staff, and then it all makes sense because it just gets passed down. Yeah.
So like cleaning flow, a lot of, so they'll start with the bathroom, but they're like, oh, that's the dirtiest,
Yeah.
so I wanna kinda get that done first.
Yeah.
So again, not that understanding before I go through. And then for your first question,
Yeah.
so I think your question was differences maybe when they're dealing with someone in isolation versus someone who's not in isolation. And yes, like staff are very, I mean, they wanna be more cautious. Like, but again, if they don't know the contact type of the product,
Yeah.
and they're not following it, period. But definitely like having that PPE on and all of that, we do see the
There was a
differences.
difference.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would say it's not as bad as hand hygiene. Hand hygiene, you really do see a difference. Cleaning stuff, you don't see it as much. The only time I saw someone really scrubbing was for C. diff. And long-term care homes don't get luckily C. diff that often. So like that staff was really, really rubbing with the wipes. So that was the only time that I really saw like a stark difference.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much for listening.